And welcome to this week's edition of Comprehend This podcast. How's everybody doing this morning? Okay, teachers, let's be honest. Grading can feel like a teacher purgatory. You know, when you're staring at 37 identical answers to Como Estas and wondering if you really need to keep your red pen industry in business? Today, we're diving into assessment without the headache. And I've got backup. Joining me are Andy Dykema and Pat Rolfes, two brave souls who've managed to escape their points police past lives and live to tell the tale. We're talking real rubrics, sanity-saving hacks, and how to keep a straight face when your admin asks, but how do you know they're learning anything? So buckle up, grab your metaphorical red pen to snap it in half later, and let's talk about how assessment can actually make sense without losing your weekend, your mind, or your caffeine supply. We'll be right back after these short messages. Ever feel like you're clinging to the edge of your teacher planner, just hoping today's lesson magically appears? Enter the CI Survival Kit, a monthly membership made for teachers who love comprehensible input, but also love not reinventing the wheel every Sunday night. Each month, you get fresh, ready-to-use lessons, time-saving tools, and just enough structure to keep your teaching life together. No stress, no guilt, just monthly help from someone who gets it. Sign up at mm.us/survival and let the survival kit do the heavy lifting for once.
Welcome to Comprehend This, real talk for real language teachers. No drills, no dry theory, just honest stories, practical ideas, and a reminder you're not alone in the CI trenches. Let's dive in.
So welcome, Andy and Pat. Pat is a returnee with us, so she's kind of a veteran here. Andy is new to us. So Andy, why don't you give us a little bit of information about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. Thanks, Scott, for the nudge. I've been using some stuff from your site previously, and kind of been. I started at a pretty traditional school in New Orleans. I taught at Jesuit high school, and so we were very kind of grammar translation, textbook heavy. And then I went to St. Martin's Episcopal School, where I learned a lot of CI techniques, and have been to several different conferences on teaching with comprehensible input and stuff like that. Then I've been at an IB school called Morris Jeff High School for a while, and then just moved over to Franklin, which is pretty awesome. Oh, I'm trying to find, where's my camera? I have my mug. There we go.
Oh, there it is.
Franklin Falcons. We're the number one public school in Louisiana. Proud to receive that distinction, and I just joined there, and I've used a mix of CI and kind of traditional techniques, and really enjoying getting into grading here. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And what about you, Pat? Give us a refresher about who you are.
I'm Pat Rolfes, and I taught for 26 years, 23 of them in Worthington School District in southwest Minnesota, which meant a 60-mile drive every day for me, 30 there, 30 back. In the winter, it wasn't so much fun. I also spent 3 years up next to the Canadian border in International Falls, which was, yes, the icebox of the nation, and we can prove it. I have been using, before I left teaching 3.5 years ago now, due to personal issues, family issues, etc. Not that I wanted to leave the kids, but I needed to take care of life. Before that, I had been using CI solely in my classroom for give or take 15 years. So I had a good run with it. I started out because my counterpart, the German teacher, she used it in her class after attending a Blaine Ray conference, and she could see what the kids could do. And I was like, well, I want my kids to do that. Yeah. And so she took me to summer workshop, and I'm like, okay, well, the only way to do this is to strap on my parachute and jump in. And so that's what I did. And The first year, I'm not going to lie, it was bumpy, but after that, it got so much easier, and I wish I had figured it out earlier in my teaching career.
Yeah. I got lucky where I did get it in my early in my career. In my second semester of teaching, I got into CI. Well, it wasn't called CI back then. The only version of CI we had was TPRS back then. Now we've got so many different flavors. We've got lots of variety, lots of activities that we can do. And I'm with you on the commute. For most of my career, I have commuted to school between 20 and 30 miles. The last 11 years, for the better or worse, because there was good and bad about it, I was a mile from my school.
Oh
There
my.
is, but that was way too close. Kids were always in my business, and so I went back to high school, and now I'm back to that 25-mile commute. So I'm with you, but mine's in California traffic, so that
Oh,
we don't have the
I'll take the
snow, but I have the traffic. So on my way home is when it's worse. In the morning, I leave early enough so I don't hit any traffic. Then I'm at school 2.5 hours earlier than I need to be. But at least I get my work done. I'd rather work and be productive for that 2.5 hours than sit an hour and 15 minutes in traffic. So I'll make that sacrifice. On the way home, though, it's about 45 minutes to an hour to get back, depending on the traffic or if there was an accident. The other day, it was last Monday, I'll never forget. Um, I was zero point 0.8 miles from my exit, zero point 0.8 miles. And my GPS went from arrival to my school in 6 minutes to arrival at school in an hour.
Oh,
In
Oh
an hour,
boy.
there was an accident that happened and blocked all the lanes of traffic. So I was like, oh my gosh. And then I did something I've never done before. And please, if there's any California Highway Patrol people out there, please do not come and arrest me and give me a ticket now. Um, but another car I saw made a U-turn on the freeway and went up the on ramp. So went backwards on the on ramp, drove up it instead of coming down it. And another car did it. Another car did it. I'm like, well, they're doing it. I'll go ahead and do it too. So for the first time in my life, I made a U-turn on a freeway and I went up the on ramp. Yeah, the on ramp. So I used as an exit ramp when it was supposed to be an on ramp. It was a trucker's on ramp, so nobody was coming down because they saw the traffic, so nobody was going down it. And I looked behind me, going, "Please don't get me pulled over! Please don't get me pulled over!" I'm looking behind me. There are like 30 more cars behind me doing the exact same thing. So then it turned instead of an hour to get to school, another 20 minutes. So that saved me a whole heck of a long time. But yeah, that was my traffic. Tell you, traffic, traffic, traffic. California traffic is a whole different kind of animal.
I think I'd take the weather.
Yeah. And Sacramento traffic is nowhere near as bad as LA or San Francisco, so I can't really complain, but yeah. So that's that. So let's go today and talk about today's topic, which is assessment without the headache. So I don't know about you. I'll tell you my story in just a moment, but what does your grading look like now? And if you made any changes in your grading, what did it look like before? And whoever would like to start can go ahead and start.
well, I think before I was very focused on form rather than function, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think your point, you mentioned points release, right? And I
Yeah.
think I was the points release, and I would have them write like the numbers and take off points if they switched the EI and the IE, or if they didn't put an accent, or if they spelling and stuff like that. I used to be really nitpicky, but what I'm trying to do now is really focus on. The IB uses the line which I like a lot in the rubrics, and it says errors do not interfere with communication, or and so if the error does not interfere with communication in the writing thing, I try not to focus on it at all. And if it's, I'll signal it sometimes. Like I have a kind of I'll underline something I don't understand in a writing thing, or I'll circle it if it's a spelling error, or I'll do a squiggly line underline if it's an agreement issue to help them do the revisions and stuff like that. But on things like that, I really don't take off points for any of that stuff. So I'm really more focused on like what are they communicating the message? Is it mostly comprehensible rather than like super nitpicky? Um, and also thinking like what's a developmentally appropriate error, right? Like verb tense endings are developmentally appropriate to make that error. You get that confused, and then you fix it and change it and stuff like that. So, but that happens with feedback and in-class interaction, not with like losing points. So
Yeah.
I think I think the long version is that or the short version is that I just used to be a lot more nitpicky about it.
And what about you, Pat?
Well, now I'm free and clear of the grading because I'm no longer in the classroom. But when I left the classroom, let's put it that way, uh, I still had my number one. I never ever used a red pen, never, because one of my friends, a teacher friend, said all the students always fear the red pen police. And it's like they see red on their paper and immediately they have a heart attack. And it's like, well, okay, so then I would grade in whatever color wasn't red. I mean, I wouldn't use black or blue usually that much unless it was very different from the pen color than what they were using. But I did a lot in purple. I did a lot. Yeah, there you go. Turquoise. Yep. Yep. That's what I would use. Um, I would do orange. I would do pink. I would, whatever color. And I too was, for the longest time, hung up on the spelling and the grammar of things and so on and so forth. But then I started just circling things. And, even though it was circled, it didn't necessarily mean I took points off for it if it was a point type assignment. If it was a quiz, yes, unfortunately, then I would take points, but that was a different situation. It was an assessment that I needed to do to keep my higher ups happy. Um, you've got the guard dogs waiting to catch you not teaching something. It's like, if they can talk to me, then I know they understand it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have speech bubbles above their head when they're talking to me, so I don't know if they're spelling things right or not in their head. They're communicating with me, and that's the goal. And if that works, there you go. But to keep, the people happy and admin and everything, they got the quiz every now and then. And I usually saved it for Friday. And we talked about how there was going to be an assessment coming up soon, the entire week, so that they had plenty of time to prepare themselves. And it wasn't a surprise. And I gave out perfect score stickers. And you wouldn't believe how giddy high school students would be about getting a sticker on their paper.
Oh, yeah.
Just look what I got, look what I got. And it's like, okay, you're a little too excited about it, but that's okay.
And coloring.
But
They never
yeah,
use
they
color in it.
absolutely love those stickers. And I would give out so many of them, I'd have to keep replenishing my sticker pile because they knew about it all the time, so they were ready for it and they felt comfortable with it. And zippity doo, they'd go through it in like 5 minutes or less. And that would be my only thing I would do on the weekend is grade that one quiz. And I wouldn't be, dealing with essays and all that stuff that I saved for during the week and then after school or before school looking at those.
Well, you may have seen me looking around. I was trying to see if I had one of my multicolored pens, but I have the kind that Andy has there. Mine, I have the traditional ones, and I have yep, I have the blue one, and I have the other one too that you have. So I buy them in 4 packs. They're hard to find nowadays, but I buy them on Amazon. I buy the 4 packs. But I also have one that's got, I don't know if it's 6 or 7 colors on it. It's a little fatter. It's not by the same company, and I got, that's what I was trying to find. If I had a 3 pack, and I couldn't find where I put the other extra ones. I was looking for them. So yes, I do the colorful pens. Um, it's funny, Pat, that you mentioned about I wrote some things down, some notes, because you said some good things here. Um, the red. My sister teaches elementary school, and they were told that they couldn't choose any one color for grading. They had to be color agnostic, so that kids wouldn't associate any particular color with being bad. So they had to rotate through the colors as they grade. So, a couple weeks in red, couple weeks in green, couple weeks in orange. So no gray, no color, because I guess they were finding that kids who maybe their favorite color was red, now it was being associated with being bad, and they all kind of mental things. So that was kind
Fascinating.
of funny about that. Stickers, Pat, you're richer than I am. I don't use stickers because you have to keep replenishing them. I use stamps. So I would
Well, I would
find,
use those too.
yeah, I would always find Spanish stamps. I would find, and then I bought, and I still have. They did not lie. The never-ending lifetime stamp. I have a giant stamp, ink stamper, and I stamp them in there. And I've had it for my entire career. I bought it in my second year of teaching, and I am now in my 24th, I think 24th year. And I have had it, and it's the same one I've been using year after year after year. The only thing my kids complain about is, do you have anything other than blue? So, because it's been blue, I'm like, hey, I bought this for like $6 way back in 2002, and it's still going strong, and it's going to be there until I retire. So I use that. That way I don't run out of stickers. I used to use, only time I used stickers though was I bought something from Senior Woolley, and he threw in some stickers in the pack. And so I used those until we ran out. But absolutely,
I would
didn't
I
want to
would
spend
get
money on
mine at
stickers.
Walmart,
Oh,
and they would be just the generic smiley face sticker.
oh,
There wasn't any Spanish written on them. If it was a like an essay or something, then I would use my pretty Spanish stickers that I got from Teacher's Discovery or
oh,
whatever. Those I held on to with both hands, and you had to pry them out of my fingers.
yeah.
But otherwise, I used the happy face sticker, and they would just go, "I got one! I got one! I got one!"
I
Can I show you
had,
Mr. Hundo?
okay.
Can I show y'all Mr. Hundo? This is Mr. Hundo, if I can find it. So, like on a
Oh,
paper, right? If you get 100, Mr. Hundo comes out, and
oh,
he's got
awesome.
his eyes, and so he says muy bien. So that I just draw my little ridiculous caricatures, and then the kids are like, "Oh, Mr. Hundo's back."
Now,
Wow, you
see,
are way more creative than I am.
and I was just going to say, when Pat was talking about the smiley faces, I don't want to spend that much time. I grade really quickly, especially because when I taught in Vegas, I had 280 students.
Holy
So,
smokes!
grading
Wow.
280 quick writes was time consuming. So, I found, I don't even know if they still make it, but the Crayola markers, they had
They
the
do make them.
marker, but no, no, not that, no, but what I'm talking about is they had at the end of the Crayola markers, they had
Yeah.
different shapes. So they
Yep.
still make those. So
They still
they had
make
a
them.
smiley face one, a star one, lightning bolt, and I would just stamp them on the papers to save time because drawing a smiley face took too long for me to spend on a paper. So I never did any of that. So let me tell you about my situation. When I started teaching, I was not a certified teacher. I was on an emergency permit, so I had no teaching experience and no teaching school behind me. I hadn't even started teaching school yet, just had my bachelor's. So when you come in and you don't know what you're doing, like I had no clue what I was doing, you just beg, borrow, and steal whatever you could. So I took someone else's syllabus and I took their grading program just the way they had it in there, like, how many percent for projects, how many percent for, quizzes, tests, homework, all that stuff. And I just copied that down, and that's what I did. And then I had this girl, Brittany, and I'll never forget her. She sent me her senior picture, in school, and how kids do that when they're seniors. And she wrote on the back because she knew. She goes, "Thank you for passing me." because I was teaching Spanish 2 my first year, and she knew nothing. Absolutely, positively, not a single thing. I don't know how she passed Spanish 1. She was a nice girl, but she couldn't do any Spanish whatsoever. But she always turned in her homework, and her projects were already always nice and pretty. So she earned her points for that. And that saved her. That gave her her C when she should have had an F, because she couldn't do Spanish, and I should have been measuring how much Spanish she could do, which was 0. So, but that's not what happened. Using the grading program that the other teacher that I copied from, she was able to pass. And so then I said to myself, this cannot happen again. So starting in my second year of teaching, I did a whole bunch of research over the summer about standards-based grading, and I read a book, grading how to grade for learning, and that was my Bible. I read that book. It had nothing to do with languages, but just how to grade for actual learning, no matter what the class was. And it was a look at standards-based grading, and from that point, that's where I started doing that. And in that second year, I was experimenting on my kids live. And it was so funny because I always made them think that it was their choice. But I just kind of painted the picture brighter on the side that I wanted them to move to, because I was like, do we do averages? Is that going to work better? Is it going to be median? Is that going to be work better? Or is it going to be mode? Was that going to work better? And how different ways to calculate. We all know the average, which is mean. The median was picking the middle number when you put them in high to low or low to high. And then the mode was picking the most common number that showed up in the kid's grade. So I tried all of these, and they all had their pluses and minuses. But when I wanted to switch, every quarter we switched grading things to see how it was going to work. And I ended up sticking with the median. That was the most accurate one. And we stuck with that one for a while. But grading programs don't really do median unless they turn it on from the district side of it. So that was where I started with, was that percentage and points back then. And kids would always ask for, they would fight for every last living point they possibly could. And they weren't thinking about the whole picture. And so when I switched to proficiency, my goal was to look at them and say, when I look at the kid, I have an image of what they can do in the language. And then when I look at the grade book, it should match. So if I thought that they were proficient in Spanish, then that was a B. I better find a B in the grade book. So I worked really hard in making sure that their ability matched the grade book. And I played with the math, and I am not a math person. I cried over the math. I'm like, okay, math teacher, please help me understand. I put in 100% in the grade book for a child, and their grade went down. How is that possible? I couldn't understand the math, and I would go after school every day, explain to me this math. I've got to figure this out. And I came out with the system that I've been using, and I've been using for the majority of my career, is grading towards that proficiency. And now I look at my kids, and I can say, that is a top kid, and the grade matches. That is a struggling kid, and the grade matches. And so the grade isn't because you showed up and smiled and did all your work. It's how well you did your work. And so that for me was really the key to it, because I really wanted to make sure that the grade wasn't a let me give you a grade. It's one that you earn, but also reflected what you actually can do in the language. And we lost Andy, so hopefully he'll come back shortly. But that's how I worked with the grade book. It made that big change for me. And I'll add one other thing. Somewhere in the middle of that, I had to grade grammar, and I stopped grading specific grammar. But when I did grade grammar, how I did it, because the typical way is you look at it and you subtract points for not putting an accent mark, or subtract a point or a half a point for not spelling it correctly, or the word order. What I did is I thought of it like math. What's the lowest common denominator? What was the least of an answer I would expect? And they would get full credit for that answer. And if they made it more correct, like the accent mark was there, or the spelling was there, or the right order was there, or the indirect or direct object pronoun was there, they would get plus point. They would get bonus points for that. So that's kind of how I dealt with it. Instead of taking a negative aspect, taking away points, they got more positive points for doing it. So that's kind of how I approached that.
Wish I would have thought of that. That
Oh,
would have been a lifesaver as to, worrying about every accent, every nuance
yeah,
that, like I said, if the whole goal is comprehension, they don't have speech bubbles above their head. So if they're able to say it right, I shouldn't care whether they should be able to spell it right.
yeah,
So
exactly.
that would have been a lifesaver there.
Well, I know you're not teaching right now, but what were some of the assessments, the kind of go to assessments that you like to use to assess your students?
Well, if it was an assessment for the powers that be, it'd be straight up points. It would be, they got 19 out of 20 on their quiz or whatever. If it was for me in the classroom kind of thing, then I used some of your rubrics. I might have fine tweaked them a little bit to fit my room culture a little bit more. But I used some of your rubrics from immediate immersion, especially on the free writes. And I even took some of the free write ones, and used them when I had them do like a more lengthier essay that they got to work on for a couple of days in class. To I said, it's not an essay, you're writing me a story. You need to include this many characters, you need to have there be a problem, you need to solve the problem, and everybody ends up happy. We're not blood and gore here, guys, so nobody gets hit by a meteor. And if you can't say it in Spanish, which is the language that I taught, if you can't say it in Spanish, you don't get to say it. You got to come up with another way of saying it, because you don't get your dictionary, you don't get your phone, you don't get your iPad, and the papers stay here.
Yeah,
So, it's got to come out of your head. And so, and then I would usually let them have their notebooks for like the last 20 minutes or half hour or whatever. That way they could verify whatever they wanted to verify. So it wasn't a complete assessment, because I let them, in their books or in their notebooks. But yeah, it was a lot of your rubrics that I used, your speaking rubrics. When I would be listening to them talk about whatever country they drew, and they had to tell me 3 interesting facts about it, and they had to tell me if they had a president or whatever for a leader, and something that they found fascinating, whether it was the fact that Shakira came from that particular country, or that it has 487 volcanoes, or that, whatever. They had to give me a fascinating detail to them. And I remember that one because one of my students said, "It's got really awesome amusement parks." And he called it, he couldn't say amusement parks, but he kept saying montañas rusas, roller coasters. And I'm like, really? Roller coasters? What are we talking about here? And it took me a minute. I'm like, I bet he means amusement parks. And I was right. That's what he meant. But he got the point across. He communicated it.
yeah,
It just took me a little bit on the uptick to put
to
A
catch
plus
on. Yeah,
B. So those assessments, my principal, who is my direct supervisor, would ask me, well, how are you assessing these kids? You don't have very many grades in your grade book. I can see your grade book online. You don't have very many grades in there. I said, I assess them from the minute they walk through the door to the minute they leave my door, I'm assessing them. Not all assessments are written down. And, if they can understand me when I'm presenting a lesson, well, then their listening assessment is 100%. If they can produce what I ask them to produce, well, then their speaking assessment is 100%, and likewise, and so on and so forth. I don't know about how you do your classes, but that's kind of what I thought was if they can understand, well, then it's getting through the muck and they're understanding it. And so it's 100%. They what I said, even if it was a little bit more complicated of an idea. I slowed way down. That was my most difficult piece of either assessing or just simply life in the classroom was to go slow enough.
Yeah.
I was like, zoom. And they'd be like, huh? Like, okay, yep, that's right. Got to back her up here. Let's back up the cart. We'll try it again. And I'd slow her way down, and then they'd be like, oh, yeah, I got that this time. So that would be how I would assess is basically on a daily basis, but occasionally in the grade book, just to
Yeah.
make happy.
Yeah. For me, I only did those essays that you were talking about on finals. So I would not do them otherwise because I actually hated them. Oh, Andy is back. Let me add him back in. One moment, Andy, getting you back in here. Welcome back.
Irritated about.
I usually did them when it was parent-teacher conference time, because that way I could show the parent, look what your kid can do, and they've written an entire sheet of paper worth of Spanish, I said, and this is after 4.5 weeks in a quarter. And that's when I would do mine, would be around parent teacher conference time. Look what they did this time. And then the next time they had it for the end of the quarter, I'd attach it to the information to go home, and it would be front and back of a sheet of paper. And, they would grow each chunk. And so that's what I wanted the parents to see. It wasn't about them writing the essay. It was about what I could prove to the parents they could do.
Yeah, we didn't have parent conferences. We always had open house, but it was way at the beginning of the school year, so there was no chance to doing that. So I did that, but I hated that one because it was too polished and I couldn't figure out what they actually needed help on anymore, because if they cleanly erased it and rewrote it, I couldn't tell there was even a mistake there. So my go-to, my absolute favorite of all assessments is the quick write. And I know Andy wanted to talk about that, and we'll talk about it a little more in a moment, but I'll just tell you about my assessments I use. My quick write I love. There's no planning. There's no time to fix errors or any of that kind of stuff. It's pure. What they get right is what they know, what's been acquired, and what's not right is what I still need to work on with them. Now, I told you at one time I had over 280 students, and I do not like grading. I know I teach about grading and all this stuff, but it's not something I like look for. Oh, I get to grade all these papers, and having a stack of papers in my inbox stresses me out. So I always get my papers back within 24 hours. Always. Always, 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 always. I find a way. Because it stresses me out to have that there, that stack of papers. I don't like to have it. So I had to find a way to grade really quickly. So I'll put it back up here. You can get a copy of my rubrics that Pat was talking about here. But I use my rubrics to grade. I do not mark up papers. And I thought I was doing it wrong, but I didn't want to do it because it took too much time. I know personally, I took German, French, and Spanish in school. My German teacher would mark up every single error, and we had to rewrite it to correct the errors. And you always get a little sunken feeling when you got that paper back and it had all that blood all over it with all the little marks on it. So I didn't want to do that to my students, but I had no research to back it up. I just had my personal anecdote that it made me feel bad. even though I got good grades on it, I said, I don't really think I deserve the A because look at all this red marks that was on the paper. So I didn't want to do that to my kids. But then the research shows, and I can't quote where the research is, it's been told to me, and I am not a research person. If someone says it is, that's the way it is, I don't go and back it up. It's just not me. I'm not that kind of a person. So but they did analysis on three different ways of grading. One is to mark up every wrong answer and mark it all up on the paper. One was to pick one common error, let's say subject verb agreement, and just mark those errors on the paper. And the other one was not to mark up anything, but just put a positive comment at the end of the paper. And then they compared growth over time. And there was negligible growth between the three of them. So
Mm.
whether marking up the paper, marking up only one error, or putting a positive comment down, there was negligible growth. If there was any positive growth, it was in the third one with the positive comment. That was the only growth that they saw, and it was negligible. So I'm like, why would I want to spend 15 to 20 minutes marking up a paper if it's not going to help them in any way? And most of the time, the kids would just look at the grade, crumple it up, and throw it in the garbage and wouldn't even pay attention to all the marks. Like, that was 20 minutes of my life. So I didn't do that. Um, the other thing was that I did for a kid when I saw that positive comment thing could work, I put smiley faces on my papers. So I had a girl whose writing was trash. I couldn't understand it at all. But I put a smiley face on it. And she was so excited she got a smiley face on it. And she goes, I'm going to work and get 2 smiley faces next time. So the next time I put 2 smiley faces on her paper because I heard her say that. And then I didn't give her any more smiley faces for a few weeks. And then I gave her a couple more and she kept working. But it was such a problem. I actually went to her English teacher and asked her, does she have a problem writing in English? Because her Spanish is so poor that I'm thinking it's coming from she doesn't have a strong English background in writing. And she said her English writing was pretty bad as well. I didn't mark up her papers. All I did was put these smiley faces, and she got up to 4 smiling faces every once in a while. But from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, she went from a solid F to a C minus in writing.
Mm.
And all I did was put a smiley face on her paper, and we do them weekly every time. So it does help a little bit because she felt more confident by getting those smiley faces. So I decide I do not want to waste all that time on the papers. Now,
Yeah.
here's my exception. I always invite
Refrigerator's fine.
students,
We'll put the
if
rest
you
away
want to
afterwards.
know what you did right and what you did wrong and go over your paper, you're welcome to come see me before or after school, not during lunch, because that's not an investment of time on their part. They're already at school.
Mm.
Before or after school, come see me with your paper in hand, and we will go through it line by line by line. This way we both benefit. Number one, I can ask questions like, what did you mean here? Not me trying to guess what you're trying to mean. So I can show them the right way to express that. And then 2, they're seeing why I'm seeing the errors and why those errors are problematic, because they are hindering my comprehension. So we can both benefit because it's a discussion between us and it's more memorable. And because they gave up their personal time before or after school, it became much more strong. They were more invested in that. And I only get 3 or 4 per year that ever want to do that. And those kids are the kids who are truly going to benefit. They're not the kids who look at their grade, crumple it up, and throw it in the garbage. They really want to understand. So I'll put in the time for those kids, but putting it in for all 280 of my kids when only 3 or 4 are going to benefit from it, it's not a good use of my time. And I'm going to tell you, it only takes to grade one of those essays, it only takes me as long as it takes me to read the essay. I don't spend any more time. So if it's 100 words or so on average, we're talking a minute, maybe a minute and a half at most. So I can get a class of 40 done in 45 minutes, easy. So it was really easy for me to get them back in the 24 hours. So that's my absolute most favorite assessment, followed by my speaking assessments, because I don't do the speaking assessments. They're skits, because that's a drama performance. That's not a Spanish speaking assessment. and my kids spontaneously have to get up and speak about pictures or whatever it might be, and I can get through a whole class in one period with time left over, even if I have 45 kids in a classroom. So both of those, I love them because they're pure. They don't have time to plan it, they don't have time to practice it, they don't have time to polish it. It is what it is, what it is, and that really gives me the truest picture of what they can do in the language. And so I like that so very much. And welcome back, Andy. Now that
Sorry.
we got you back here.
Yeah, sorry. I I thought my phone was going to last longer, and then it didn't. So that was hubris on my part. Um, yeah, I love that instant assessment, like doing it right in the class. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I like your point about the agency and the autonomy, also about like having the kids, like the ones who are really gonna like be curious about this, like really come and do that. Um, and can I talk about one thing one of my former colleagues does that I really like and want to steal?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's kind of a little related to I don't know if you know Senora Chase, but she does
Yep.
these thing called magic cards, which I love. And that's oh yeah, so that's the free write. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the free write that I
I'm
use.
just getting it ready because I'm going to have you talk about it next. So go ahead and
Oh,
talk
okay.
about what your magic cards first.
Okay. So magic cards I think were great, and she does it for listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And then oops, sorry, wait. There we go. And you have just one like it's just like a quadrant, and then you have
Yep.
the kid's name on the back, and then if you do card talk like Mike Pito I think does card talk where you like have them draw something they like or whatever. I use this for like random like calling on people, and I haven't rolled it out in my new school yet, but I intend to. And the way I intend to do it is put a summative for each of these. Like we have semester summatives for we would go by semester. So I'm going to have a semester summative for reading, and a semester summative for what is that? Listening, writing, and speaking. And then if a kid, for example, like this is for like little small in class tasks, like if I ask a kid a question and they're able to like give me a decent answer in Spanish, and or if they don't understand it, if they ask me for clarification, then you put like a check. You just put a check mark in the you grab your pen out of your hair, right? And then you just do a check mark. And the check mark is like, hey, they did pretty well with that, right? And then if they, if they start reading aloud and then they, you know, kind of forget a place and then they check out and they're doing it kind of halfway. I do a squiggly line, right? And then if they refuse, like if they, if you ask them, like, hey, I need a volunteer to read aloud, can you do it? And they're like, no, I don't know. That one's a little, I'm not so convinced on that. But if it doesn't go well, you put an X. And then what I intend to do is once I get 10 marks in a column, right? So like, they did this listening thing and they understood it. That's a check mark. And then out of those 10, I can be like, okay, they have 10 check marks, that's 100. Or if they have 9 check marks and 1 squiggly, that's a 95. And that's their speaking magic card summative. So that's how I'm thinking of doing it. And then one thing that my colleague does, which is really awesome, he has this kids put this in their notebooks every day. So they just draw this little like thing in the notebooks, and he gives them like the kids have to tell him to put, like during class they have to say, "Profe, you have to sign my notebook," and they're like, "Okay, I did." He uses an IB rubric, so he's out of 8. So it's like the kid's like, I deserve an 8 out of 8 for speaking today because of this, and he's like, you know what, you're right, and he signs it up. And they're like, I read aloud today. I think I get an 8 for reading, and he's like, well, you kind of goofed off a little bit, so we're going to call it a 6 of 8. You do it better next time, and stuff like that. And then he makes them add up their average and puts that in as a summative, like later on in the quarter. So I think the agency and like the immediate feedback are the 2 things that I really love about those strategies.
Yes. And I do something similar, but I don't do it with all the 4 categories.
Mm.
I have name cards that I use for my kids to call on, but and I tell them anytime that they speak to me is a potential speaking assessment.
Mm.
So,
Hmm.
when I'm speaking to them, like when we do conversation days, or if I know a kid's really nervous, I'll try to engage them in conversation as they walk into the classroom, so they're not even thinking it's an assessment right there. They're just, they're coming into class, and I'll go, "Oh, cómo estás hoy? How are you doing today?" And trying to get them to engage with me for a couple minutes in Spanish. Um, then I'll go on their card and I don't do a check mark. I do an A B C D E F, I mean, E F, A B C D F.
Mm.
Thing on there. And then after two or three of them, I will average them together to give them a quiz grade in speaking. So
Mm.
it's a little bit informal. It's just for the speaking one that I do that on, because everything else I have tangible, something tangible they're turning in. I have a listening assessment, I have a reading assessment, I have a writing quiz. But the speaking, I do that. Now, if they're having a bad day, I don't put that in there. I'll just put like you said, like an X in there, which just tells me
Hmm.
they're having a bad day and I need to come back at them again in the future to do that. So that's kind of
Right.
how I do one of my speaking quizzes. It's really informal, but we have conversation days every Monday where I'm spending the whole period we're talking about different things, not always about what they did over the weekend or whatever the topic is of the day. And then I'll make a note of those kids on there. I know my rubric, I know it in my head, so I can just put the grade down. And then after about 3 or 4 grades, I'll average it together and then put it in for the grade in the grade book. So that's kind of how I do that. And I don't know if I got that from Anne Marie Chase or if I picked it up on my own. I don't know. I'll give credit to her because it probably did
Yeah.
come from her. Um, I don't know, but I that's what I've always done, and it works out really, really well for me. But I only do it for
For the
the
speaking.
speaking portion because that's the only thing I don't have any tangible unless they record it. But on a casual
Mm.
conversation thing, it's not. I don't have a tangible thing to prove it.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it that way. So I like that.
I like that. Yeah, and that makes sense, because like I've guess what I've given reading points for is like reading aloud, like because I do a write and discuss, or I'll have a kid like volunteer to read a paragraph aloud or something like that because I want to get them speaking as much as possible, and I'll have them partner read to each other. So sometimes I've given reading grades, quote unquote, for stuff like that. Um, but I do but you're right. We do have reading assessments and we do have
Yeah,
writing
because
assessments. Yeah. Yeah.
for me, I only want to assess the reading comprehension. And so by reading out loud doesn't show me whether they understand what they read or not. It just shows whether they can pronounce it correctly or not. So I don't assess that particular piece. And one of the things someone mentioned to me just recently reminded me that I used to do this. I haven't done it in a while. But during reading a novel, I'll take maybe 10 minutes for once a week when we're reading a novel. It may take 4 weeks to read a novel, so I do it 4 times, and I'll have kids read 2 sentences, but in
Mm.
English. So
Mm.
we're going through the thing, and they're going to read to me. We're reading in the novel, and I call them up. Okay, Johnny, next 2 sentences, read them to me in English, and I give them a grade based on that, and not to put in the grade book, but for me to note whether they are high performing, mid performing, or low performing in comprehension so that I know I need to work with them about certain things. Or I might use it to scaffold and say, okay, now this kid needs to have 3 versions of a embedded reading, and this kid might
Mm.
need to have 5 versions of an embedded reading, so there's 5 steps in there. So I'm using it that way because I can see how much they struggle with doing it, and I don't let them struggle for long doing that. As soon as they hesitate, I give them the word they need, as I don't want to make them feel dumb, but I want to be able to tell whether or not they can actually understand what they're reading. So I'll have them do that live translation, and not for the translation's sake, just to see whether they understand what they're reading. But I only do that 10 minutes at a spell. It takes 10 minutes to go through all 30 kids um, once a week for 4 weeks. So I get a feel for where they are so that I know when I give them a practice how I should scaffold it for that particular student. If they're really strong, then I can give them the original. I don't have to scaffold it at all. But if they're in that mid-level, I might have to scaffold it, with 2 or 3 different embedded reading versions to bring them up to that final one. Or the third one might be I need to do not only give them 3 or 4 versions, but also I might have to gloss it a little bit more than I would have to for other kids. So everybody got a different version of the same story, but it's written at their particular level or given enough scaffolding for their particular level to be successful. So I use that
Yeah,
activity.
yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
Now we're getting close to the end. We're already can't believe we're almost through. I know Andy said he wanted to talk about my quick write paper. So I put it up on the screen so we can all see it. I know if you're listening on a podcast, you can't see it. But you're welcome. I will put the link to it in the show notes so that you can take a look at it after the fact and download your version of it for it as well. But Andy, what did you want to say about this?
Well, I kind of wanted to just propose an idea because I have a rotating schedule. I wanted to put my idea on how
Okay.
I'm thinking of using these and see how it lands and what y'all's thoughts are.
Okay.
Because like I think it's a great writing assessment because it's got like all kinds of I mean, there's all kinds of potential. Like you can write about the cultural topic you've been covering, right? And you can assess skills, like all kinds of different writing skills, just depending on what they want to write about, and they can show a bunch of different skills. So what I was thinking is of doing this every 2 weeks because we have a B day and an A day alternating every other Friday. So I was going to call it Free Write Friday and just do 20 minutes every Friday, and then I was going to post the like word counts. So say for example, like because they have a big push to kind of display student work. So on my wall, I was going to say, okay, period 1A, students wrote an average of 190 words in 2 minutes or 146 words. And furthermore, they averaged in novice mid-level. And furthermore, this was like a high point that they did. And then if there's like a group feedback thing, I could kind of put it out and just do like a whole class debrief. And then on the back of it, like it's got these things that the kids can work on individually and have grades. So I was curious, like what your thoughts were about like if you had experience with like posting results like that and making it kind of like a data driven and proficiency driven activity. And then also like just your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't post the actual quick writes, but we have a board that I put on the results board that my kids, we compete against each other in the same level. So I'll put in the weekly average scores up there. Now they know that once I do it the traditional way, the way it was presented to me way back when by Blaine Ray back in 2001. So I do it starting at 10 minutes. When the class average hits 100, then I drop the time by 30 seconds with our goal getting to 5 minutes by the end of the school year. The first class at each level, because I used to teach levels 1, 2, and 3. Right now I'm only teaching, this semester I'm teaching levels 1, and next semester I'm teaching 1 and 2. Each level, the first class at each level that gets the 100 word average at 5 minutes wins a pizza party on me. So it's a competition. So I am like, come on, period 2. Are you ready to let period 1 beat you? Look, they're down to 9.5 minutes and you guys are still at 10. Come on, you can add in a couple more words to get in there to get it out. I pit them against each other to do that. So that's how I do that. And I put that up there. And it is data driven because I want to know how many words. I tell them we're going to have bad days, so you're going to have this. But I want to see from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, I want to see a general upward trend. And if you write the same amount of words, but we went down 30 seconds, that's really an increase of words. And I've kind of played with maybe I should do a word per minute version instead of a average, because then they can actually see that we went down 9.5 minutes. Last week you wrote 100 words. This week at 9.5 minutes you wrote 100 words. We went down 30 seconds ago. I didn't improve. Well, yeah, you did. Your word per minute went up, slightly because the time went down. So I'm kind of playing with that idea. Now, for the
Yeah.
exemplars, what I've done in the past is I've saved some. I have them saved where I typed up kids. They couldn't tell by the handwriting. Took the names
Mm.
away, couldn't tell by the handwriting, and I typed them up error for error. So every error that was in there, I had to turn off grammar check. I had to turn off spell check because it would automatically fix the errors. I left them in there. They didn't put punctuation in there. I didn't put punctuation. So they're the exact copy just typed out of the errors. So I have a couple examples of A's, couple examples of B's, couple examples of C's, couple examples of D's, and a couple examples of
Mm.
F's. And then I'd make copies of these, and we would calibrate the rubric together as a team, with the kids and everything. So I put them in
Mhm.
small groups. They all have a copy of the essays, and in no particular order. And then they're supposed to grade within their group and give each one a grade. They have the rubric, and then we discuss. We'll go, okay, essay number 1. How many people gave it an A? How many people gave it a B? How many people gave it a C? How many people gave it a D? How many people gave it an F? And I would have them justify why they gave what they gave.
Mm.
And then I would say what I would give, and then I say why I would give that particular grade. And 9 times out of 10, they graded harder than I did. But they got a really good feel of what a good paper looked like. And I did that twice a year so that they could do that. They got a really good thing. It's something that we also do as a team. We would do too, so that we were all grading off the same rubric and we all interpreted the same rubric the same way. So that when
Yeah.
we did grade, we were all relatively in the ballpark of each other. So one teacher wasn't giving an A to where the rest of us thought that was a C type of a
Right.
situation. So that worked really, really well. But I don't see a problem if it's okay. The problem here, at least for us in public schools, especially in California, is FERPA. So
Mm. Yeah.
posting someone's grade or a graded paper up there, even if it's a good grade with their name attached to it, can violate FERPA.
Oh, that's
So
interesting. Okay.
that's something. And kids go, "What do they care? It's an A." I go, because some kids don't want to be known as the smart kid.
Right.
They don't want that identity. They really try to hide that in the classroom. They don't want people to think they're the smart kid, because the smart kids get called nerds and geeks and all those kinds of things. They don't want that kind of notoriety. So
Yeah.
if it's okay in your state and in your school, then great. I think it's great to show that kind of stuff and let kids feel that, that, ooh, I've got the A paper, I've got that type of
Yeah.
thing. But they were just so big on us about FERPA. We couldn't even have kids grade each other's papers,
Mm.
because then
Yeah.
that other kid would know that grade. And we used to even be able to post grades on the wall, with only their student ID, but kids could figure out kids' student IDs. So, because they use the student IDs for everything, for lunches and all that stuff.
Hmm.
So we weren't allowed to post that anymore either. So they just really are really big about that. They said
Yeah.
you can't have anything more than, if you had 2 pieces of identification, then you couldn't post it. So if there was
Yeah.
2 pieces of identification on there, you couldn't do it. So we just stopped doing that kind of a stuff on there. Like a poster or something, if their name was on the back, that was fine. But
Hmm.
that is just for us, and it just may be our school district, California. I don't know,
Yeah.
but they're really strict about that FERPA with us.
Yeah.
We're not even allowed
Yeah.
to talk about a student. Let's say if I had a student, but you didn't have that student, I couldn't talk to you about that student. Even if I
Oh,
wanted to
wow.
get some, like, how do I've got this student who's doing this in my class. Do you have any ideas of how you would help that student? We couldn't talk about that student, because
Hmm.
if we didn't have that student in common, it wasn't any of your business about that student. So I know. I think of us as a whole
Okay.
school community, but they're so strict on FERPA that we
And how are
can't
you
do it.
supposed to help them?
By talking to the other 5 teachers that they have.
Yeah.
But you couldn't, like, let's say I knew that Andy was really good with troubled kids who got a poor background, not a poor background like money wise, but they have a bad background. Their life is really tough at home for whatever reason, and he has a really good way of connecting with those kids. And I've got one of those kids in my class, and I can't find a way to connect to that kid. I couldn't go to Andy and ask him, how would you handle this, because he doesn't have that kid. And I think that's not being efficient. Use your whole school community. You may not have that kid today, you might have them next week or a year from now, but we're all a school community and we should be able to work together to talk about that kid.
That makes sense to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. But
We got
yeah,
some comments here, so let me go ahead and put those up there before we finish here. Paula says, great assessment ideas. Paula says, I teach English as a foreign language in my country, but I can relate to many things you've experienced as Spanish teachers in the States. Yes, it doesn't matter what you teach. Any language as a second language works the same way. We do the same kinds of activities. So thank you for engaging with us, Paula. We appreciate that. What country do you teach in, Paula? Oh, while she's coming up with that. So those are some ideas that I have. I think it's a really good idea, though, to post if you can do so.
yeah,
Like a wall like that. I think that is really, because kids sometimes feel like that. Bolivia. So we've got Paula from Bolivia. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So I really think that's a good idea because it used to be we used to post other kids' work up a lot to make it look, to give them the kudos that they deserve. And sometimes I think sometimes we get laws that aren't very student friendly.
yeah.
They're not
Yeah,
student friendly.
I like your idea of like making it kind of a class competition because I do feel some of my kids are like academically competitive, and I feel like that can challenge a little bit of that. Like come on, first period, what's up? Like
Yeah,
y'all wake up in the morning, last period's doing better than you, and they're ready to go home. Come on.
I know. This is my second year back in high school, so my kids are writing really. They last year because they were all taught with the textbook, they couldn't do much writing. My ones were better than my twos. But I used to go, come on, sixth graders can do better than you. I taught sixth graders for 11 years, and they are writing better than you, and you guys are 10th graders. What the heck is up with you people? You're gonna let 11-year-olds beat you? I just kind of pit them back and forth with each other. I'm like, come on, there's a pizza party on the line. Do you want me to spend $200 on pizza for you or not?
Right?
So yeah, it was kind of funny.
Yeah.
So we are coming to our end. We actually are a little bit over, but I want to do one last thing. What's your one tip for keeping your sanity with assessments? Whoever would like to start.
Andy, go ahead, since you were out of the chat there for a little bit.
I'd say, and I'm not always good at doing this, but I would say just make your plan for assessing it like before, right? Like if you're gonna assess something, like is it possible to do it to grade it and enter the grade in class while the kids are doing so? And if so, do that, because just like I'm very similar with the piles of papers. They just like and I
Yeah.
have this pile, and then I move the pile on top of another pile, and then it gets under another pile, and it's just my life is piles. So if you can simplify it, like absolutely do. And if you can make like little assessments, like if all you care about assessing right now is Sarah and a star, it's okay to make a 10-question quiz like, do they know the difference? Do they not? And then just read it, instant feedback in class, right? But but yeah, just I think smaller and quicker feedback is always better. That's my thing.
What about you, Pat?
Well, like I said before, from the moment they walk into the room to the moment they leave the room, they're being assessed. Can they communicate with me? If the answer is yes, then hey, they win the prize for the day. If they are sitting there with this very confused look on their face going, huh? Then okay, there's something I need to work on to get them to that point. So from the minute they walk in to the minute they leave, they're being assessed. It's just sometimes you've got to put something in the book to keep the other people happy in the school district.
Yeah,
So you do what you got to do to keep your job.
absolutely.
That's right.
And I will say for myself is if it doesn't tell me how well they can do the language, whatever language it is, it's not going in the grade book.
Mm.
So a notebook check doesn't tell me how well they can do the language. That's just putting a grade in for a grade's sake, and it doesn't tell me how well they can do the standards. So that doesn't go in there. One of our teachers likes to do the paper cutout flowers in Mexican culture. They make the little paper flowers. She wanted to do that. She goes, I'm all about that. I'm like, that doesn't tell me how well they can do the language, so it doesn't go in the grade book. You're welcome to track those things. Like I track the number of words my kids write on a quick write, but that doesn't tell me how well they can do Spanish. It just tells me
Mm.
how fast they can write the words. The actual using the rubric to evaluate that quick write um, is where I get the value of of how well they can do the language, and that's what goes in the grade book. Typically, my grades, I only have 15 grades per quarter in my grade book. I have 3 grades. Well, actually, it's only 12 now because I taken away one of the things. I only assess listening, reading, speaking, and writing, and I grade 3 activities in each of those. So going into the final or the midterm, they'll have 2 listening assessments, 2 reading assessments, 2 writing assessments, and 2 speaking assessments. And then on the midterm or final, they'll have that third one because it'll have listening, reading, writing, and speaking on it. I embed culture within those, so I don't grade culture separately anymore. I used to grade it separately, but I don't. I embed it in what I'm already doing. So I learned that from IB. So I embed it in what I'm doing, and so I don't assess it separately. So I only have 12 big grades in my grade book that really determine what my kids can do. Do I have other grades in the grade book to make admin happy? I do. They're under a category that is worth 0. So it looks like there's grades in the grade book, but it doesn't add or subtract to the grades because those things do not tell me whether or not they understood or they performed any of the standards. And I'm not for. I have a friend who's always about notebook checks. I'm like, why are
Yeah.
you doing notebook checks? I want to see if they're organized or not. Well, just walk around the room and you can see if they're organized or not, and you can pick out the kids who aren't, and you can help them if they need help with that. But I'm not going to collect all these notebooks, look at them, mark them up, and then send them all back. I have something called a life, and I want to enjoy that life. I don't want to be grading forever. And my
Yeah.
second thing I'll tell you is I have my kids grade write every week without fail, except for level 1. Level 1, they need that silent period. So if you're teaching in a traditional school year where you see them from September to June, then I start 3rd month. That's doing
Mm.
that quick write. If you teach like I teach right now, which I actually hate the system, but the 4x4, where I only see my kids, I see them every day, but only for 20 weeks. And then they take
Mm.
4 new classes at the end of for the next 20 weeks. Then I do it on week 5. So week 5 is when they start writing in level 1. But level 2, 3, anything else, they start writing in week 1 and they write every week religiously. But just because they write does not mean you need to grade it. So I
Mm.
randomly pick 1 class set a week to grade. So I'm only grading 30, 35 papers, 40 max a week. So I can keep my sanity, and the kids do not know which ones I'm grading in advance. They don't know until they get it graded back. So they have to try in every single one. But this way, grading every week, only 1 class set, I can easily get 2 grades in per class before the grading period is over without even trying very hard. So that works out really, really well because I don't want you to do what English teachers do where they have them write every week and think that not only do they have to read every single one every week and give a grade on every single one every week, that they have to mark it up every grade every week. And that just takes hours and hours of their lives. You see English teachers with suitcases bringing papers home. And the kids always say, why does it take my English teacher 2 weeks to grade, give me back my essay? I even forgot I wrote that essay by the time I get it back. It's because of that. It takes up way too much time. So they don't need it. It doesn't benefit them. Faster feedback, like Andy has said, is much more important than marking up all their papers and giving them feedback on every single one. And there's not much growth from week to week to week anyways. The growth happens after maybe a month and a half, 2 months. So grading every week, it doesn't make sense in any way. And we want to have our lives. We got to have that work-life balance. And as a younger teacher, I used to take everything home with me. And the first maybe couple of months, I would do the work. But after that, it would come home with me in my bag. And it would go right back to school in the same bag. And it never got touched. And it was just an exercise of weight carrying, how much weight I wanted to carry back and forth to the car on Friday nights and Monday mornings. And so I stopped bringing home. I don't grade at home ever anymore. And I don't stay after school either. Where the bell rings at 3:45, I am packed up at 3:44, waiting for the bell to ring at 3:45 for me to walk out the door because I have fourth period prep. So grading is important as long as it's telling you what a kid can do with the language. Other than that, don't spend any more time. You just want enough time to get that information out of that. Everything else, it should be input, 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 and they will be able to grow from that.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any? Go ahead,
The
Pat.
only thing I saw with my twos was I'd give them the free write the first week, and they'd be like, the look of sheer panic on their face was, they're like, we haven't had you since whenever. And it's like, yeah, well, suck it up and write. And the second week, they would almost double their word count just from a week of being back in class and a week of hearing it and using it and so on and so forth. And then they would increase even more the third week. And they're like, this isn't so bad. And I'm like, yeah, it's not so bad. Yeah, the first one was going to be rough. I knew it was going to be rough. That's why I didn't grade it. And so, but you had to start somewhere. You had to see where you were in order to know that you improved.
Exactly. And for me, most of my kids had me the year before in my middle school. So when they wrote, they were at the end of the year from the previous year, they were at 5 minutes. So they start back up at 10 minutes. They're like, dang, give me an extra piece of paper because I'm going to fill up both of them. And they could write so much. The kids who didn't have me were like yours. They struggled that first one, but afterwards the words doubled because they realize it's really not that bad. So you are very true. Paula has this parting message for us here. Thanks. It was an inspiring session. I'll share this video with my colleagues. Gracias, Paula, from Bolivia. And for those who don't know, she put in there it's from South America. All of us being Spanish teachers, we know that. Though I have kids, and I asked kids the other day because we were talking about weather, and I was talking about Montana. Go, where's Montana? And some kids go, East Coast. I'm like, Montana is not in the East Coast. Oh my gosh. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed for you. So it's really, really funny. But it's funny how international people know more about our geography than our domestic people do. It's kind of funny. With that, I want to thank both of you for going, and let's go ahead and give up our wrap up here. So that is a wrap for today's episode of Comprehend This. A huge thanks to you for tuning in, and an even bigger thanks to our guests Andy and Pat for bringing the real talk about grading without losing your sanity. And if you take one thing away today, let it be this: assessment doesn't have to feel like detention duty. Keep it simple, keep it focused on growth, and remember, you don't need to be the points police anymore. If you enjoyed hanging out with us, hit subscribe, leave a quick review, and share this episode with another teacher who's drowning in red ink. You can always watch us live on YouTube or catch the replay later on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, ditch the drills, trust the process, and I'll see you next time on Comprehend This. And that reminds me, next week we're taking a week off, so we won't be live next week, but we will be back in 2 weeks. So have a great day, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and have a great week. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.